Welcome back, and what a delight to have with us today our good friend Wallace Henley. He's one of my favorite people to have on the program, and today we're going to talk to him about a variety of things. He writes for the Christian Post, so if you subscribe, you'll read a lot of his articles. Let me encourage you to get his book called Churchill and God. It is a fantastic book. You just got to read it. And I should say God and Churchill, put that the right way. And then his book that I just finished reading for the second time, Globequake. And I think he pretty much there explains what's going on historically. And he's just terrific. So, Wallace, good to see you, my friend. How you doing, buddy?
Great to be with you, Perry. Thank you very much.
You bet. Well, listen, not everybody gets a robocall from a communist.
Actually, what was fascinating was the fact that it was not a robocall. It was a live person, and later apparently had wanted to talk to someone specific and had simply dialed the wrong number and named this person. And I said, well, that person doesn't live here, but opened it in the rather strange way that I described in the Christian Post.
All right. So you got a call from the Bernie Sanders campaign. It was a short call, but you got some pretty incredible admissions. Tell us what happened.
Well, it was late afternoon. I was lying on my sofa. I was reading a book, and my cell phone, that's what makes it interesting. My cell phone rings, and this person says, "This is the Bernie Sanders campaign in Austin." And I said, "Bernie Sanders?" I couldn't conceive of why anyone would be calling me from the Bernie Sanders campaign. So I said, "Bernie Sanders, the communist?" And she said, "Yes, that's right." I said, "Wait, Bernie Sanders, the communist?" I said it 3 times. And I said, "Ma'am, do you understand that you are an official with his campaign organization? And you just confirmed that at least within your organization, there's the sense that he's a communist. Do you understand what you've said?" Well, at that point, she named this person, and I said, "This person is not here," and the call was discontinued.
Wow. All right. First of all, that's an incredible admission. Secondly, it must be the ranks within his campaign, right?
Well, that's what struck me about it. Apparently, there are a lot of young people. I would say this person was not a really young person, but there are apparently a lot of young people. And by young people, I'm 74, so this would be anybody from, say, 45 younger. They have no education about communism. They did not grow up in that period. And because the faculties are so, in state universities, are so heavily tilted in that direction, they simply don't understand what it is. And that's what struck me, that there was such a naivete about the use of the word.
Now, you were in the Nixon White House, and give us a little bit of an insight, Wallace, of what it's like to be in the White House, the struggles. But I mean, you're next door to the most powerful man in the world, and everything's coming across his desk. What's it like?
Well, you're very much aware of how precarious global peace is, especially in the nuclear age. And again, a lot of the young people who are running today's campaigns have no memory of the 1960s, the 1970s. I came into the White House in 1970 when the Cold War was very intense. And things were so precarious. We had a doctrine that many people don't understand now called mutually assured destruction deterrent, or MAD, in which the Soviets had the power to destroy us, we had the power to destroy them, and this balance was held very delicately. The Kennedy years gave us some of the most frightening encounters. Johnson settled things down a little bit. He negotiated some SALT treaties and so forth. But there was this constant sense in that environment in which I worked that peace is a delicate thing, And if it's not treasured, if it's not protected, peace doesn't just happen. You can't put a bumper sticker on your car and say coexist and it just happens, or peace just happens. It does not. It requires a tremendous amount of concentrated effort every single day.
All right. Now, you got a vowed communist now running, socialist, communist. We've had 8 years of Obama, who basically has taken our military down to pre-World War II numbers. Does the left, I know this sounds very political, Wallace, but does the left really understand what you just said, how delicate peace really is?
The left lives in a dream world. And they believe that if America stops being the big guy on the street, that everybody else is going to put down their weapons. What the left does not understand, because the left does not have a biblically formed worldview. Our founders had that. All have sinned and come short of the glory of God. Since all have sinned, we better protect ourselves from one another. And so they built a constitution with restraints. The same thing is true on a global scale. There will always be a hegemon. A hegemon is a dominant power. And right now we see Putin understanding this. We see ISIS understanding this. We see many movements understanding that the United States is not going to walk in this role. Somebody's going to walk in it. And that's the thing that is most frightening about the left to me in terms of international affairs.
All right. Let me take a break here. We'll come back. As you know, we lost a sitting Supreme Court Justice over the weekend, Justice Scalia. We've never witnessed this before. We haven't had this. Given the dynamics that we are in a very heated presidential campaign, both left and right, we are within months of a president being termed out, and now we have an opening in the Supreme Court as a result of death. While on the scene. I have a lot of questions around that when we come back, and Wallace Henley's with us. And again, check out his latest article, My Strange Conversation with a Bernie Sanders. I gotta laugh because it's only short, but it's powerful. A Bernie Sanders staffer. We'll be right back.
I'm Paulina Leiser, producer of Focus Today. Thank you for watching this video, and make sure to check our other videos at theDove.us.
Okay, we're back with our good friend Wallace Henley, and he writes for the Christian Post, and his latest article is pretty interesting. My Strange Conversation with a Bernie Sanders Staffer. You got to read it. It's just classic. And he gets this while laying down on the couch with a cell phone. It's a great story. You need to check it out. All right, and then check out God and Churchill. He co-authors this book, and it is a must-read. And his Globequake book, again, I just finished it for the second time, and I learned so much from it. But if you want a book that explains the sequences and the seasons that cultures go through, boy, he has done an excellent job with that in Globequake. All right, Wallace, we lost one of the great justices, certainly a solid conservative. I find it very interesting that Justice Ginsburg's writing over the weekend was very interesting about she lost a buddy. Did you read that? Have you had a chance to see that?
I've not seen her statements, no.
I got to tell you, it's pretty interesting. They agreed to disagree, but they got along, which was amazing. And I think something that needs to be read about. But anyway, we lose this justice in the middle of all of this. What happens to the decisions now? Are they put on hold? What happens? Do you know?
Well, the court processes go forward. The research on cases, I would not expect major rulings until this issue has been decided, but the court processes go forward.
Okay, so
and certainly Scalia's staff would remain pretty much intact.
Okay, so the decisions that have been made that get released in June will still be final decisions.
Well, they will be decisions of the court, but I'm not sure how final they will be until, especially if they touch on serious constitutional matters. The Congress has the ability to tell the court what you can and what cases you can and cannot hear. People don't realize that. The Congress doesn't always realize that. But the Congress has great power over the courts, and the Congress can intervene at any point in these deliberations, these discussions, and they can tell the court pretty much what they can decide and what they cannot decide, what cases they can decide.
Very interesting. All right, so now, traditionally, wouldn't it be that when it happens, given this scenario, last months of a term of a president, it gets kind of booted into the next president's term as to who gets chosen here? We know that Obama's going to go for a nominee, but traditionally, isn't that what happens?
I would not say that it's always been the case in a traditional sense, but I would say that it's the appropriate position. There have been presidents who would have used that kind of power, and we have one who may well do that. So tradition may or may not dictate what happens here. Politics may dictate what happens here.
I suspect that it will. And so the president comes up with a nominee. How much pressure does that put on the Senate to give it a hearing, or just to say, no, we're not going to do this?
Well, there's great pressure on the Senate to give it a hearing. And of course, if the Senate does not do this in this case, especially with a Republican majority, then I think the voters are going to take some serious actions. And I believe that'll restrain the Senate from going forward with a nominee.
All right. So, but the president will use this and then try to use intimidation to force it. But this would, I mean, there's a possibility, given this Senate and this House of Representatives collapsing on everything the president wants, they could give a hearing and go for a vote.
That's a very great possibility, and it's disturbing that the conservative voice, again, part of the problem is we've lost any sense of conservative ideology, conservative philosophy. I was listening to the last few minutes of your interview with Dave Barton, a dear friend, and he was talking about the biblical illiteracy as well as the constitutional illiteracy. And unfortunately, many times that extends right into the Congress itself, so that the Congress does not have a full awareness of what its powers are vis-a-vis the courts. So consequently, they are intimidated by the executive branch to take action that is sometimes very precipitous, and we've seen that many times.
All right, I've interviewed a lot of people and who all agree that we need to be looking at this race from a biblical perspective as far as the candidates are concerned. But it doesn't appear that we Christians are doing that. I mean, with all due respect, I mean, you got Trump now in the 40%. Now, I don't know. They're saying it possibly he could crash now because it's gone too high, and the last debate was somewhat ridiculous. But it doesn't appear that Christians understand the importance of a biblical perspective when electing a president.
Well, somebody asked me to comment on why evangelicals would support Trump, for example. And I gave 10 reasons. I don't have them on the top of my head right now. But among those reasons is the fact that evangelicals come from a very populist worldview. Evangelicals have always been within official Christianity, kind of the outcasts in the sense of the churches in the South, out in the West, and places like that. Being comprised of people who work every day for a living. That's the nature of evangelicalism. We've not been the established church. And so evangelicals would see Trump, many of them, would see Trump as also like them, kind of an outsider, although he really is not an outsider. He's very much a part of the establishment. We also like the bully pulpit. We're pulpit centric. And so consequently, a guy who will stand up and proclaim his belief with conviction is appealing. So what happens is we vote on style. And this is, I believe, what is occurring in the Trump campaign to the extent that it's reaching some very powerful evangelical voices.
All right, so Christians are now willing to forfeit their beliefs for something that just seems to get something done fast, for someone who seemingly would get something done fast, or who would be an initial pushback. We really don't know where he is on the life issue. I mean, he was a Democrat more than he's been a Republican. He's been for abortion more than he's been against it.
That is correct. And what we're looking for, I think what most voters are looking for who are supporting Trump, they're looking for Teddy Roosevelt when we need Calvin Coolidge. Calvin Coolidge was a wonderful conservative. And Calvin Coolidge, we can trace back to his administration, actions he took, the way he restrained the presidency in a proper way. The last thing we need is a president who is going to be, quote, action-oriented. And I say that having, at the earlier part of this discussion, talked about the dangers in the world. But still, as I raised, the issue that I raised in that Christian Post column is, who are we going to give the football to? That's what it ultimately comes down to, those nuclear codes. Who are we going to give that to? We need a reasoned person who is conservative enough to understand our values as opposed to the values of, say, Putin or the values of the Marxists who run China. We need to have a president who understands that. Certainly Bernie Sanders would not. But we also need a president who is deliberate in his actions, but not precipitous in his actions. And so I'm kind of concerned about a president like that.
Has the presidency been destroyed to the point where it can't be put back into its cage? In other words, this president, through executive order, has set a new precedence for the office of president. Do you think that the presidency can be put back to its original form and purpose?
The only entity in America other than the voters, and I'm not sure this is a sad thing to say, but I'm not sure the voters fully understand all of these nuances. The only body in American government that can put the president back in the cage is the Congress. And the House of Representatives especially is so important in this. The 17th Amendment destroyed the power of the states with the ability of the states to elect senators based on a popular vote rather than through state legislatures. The House of Representatives is the body that has got to carry on this battle if we're going to get the president restrained. And the House has let us down incredibly.
Well, they got an approval rating of less than 17%. So, and going into an election. I mean, so right. Does the House, I mean, what do we do, Wallace? If the House doesn't understand their authority, then the presidency, as we know, it's been ruined.
Well, this is the point at which our founding fathers gave us an answer. They said, recall them, vote them out of office. So somehow those who are running for Congress now opposing those who are occupying those offices must articulate this concern. If I were running for Congress right now, the major point that I would be making is that these people did not do the job. I understand the job. I know what has to be done, and it's going to take great courage because the White House has immense power. I can remember when I was working for a congressman, and we very much needed some special action from the White House to authorize the expansion of I-10, Katy Freeway, going through the west side of Houston. We needed it desperately. And my congressman was called in by the chief of staff, the president's chief of staff, and told that if he didn't support one of the most egregious of the president's proposals, that we certainly would not have that money. Thank God I worked for a congressman who said, I'm not going to do it. And he voted against what they had asked him to do. Somehow we got the money anyway. That's the kind of Congress and the kind of courage it's going to take, even if we elect a Republican president.
Is Paul Ryan that kind of a leader?
I don't see Paul Ryan as that kind of leader. I do not.
So do you suspect that we may have a speakership change again after the election?
Oh, I don't doubt it, especially if we get a very strong conservative in office as president of the United States, and if we get a good conservative representation in the House of Representatives. I think probably there will be a desire to change it anyway, simply because there will be a fresh Congress that will be facing new issues under what kind of president we don't know yet. Hopefully a conservative.
Okay, where is the RNC these days? Are they too pro-establishment to do any good?
The RNC has been too pro-establishment for a long, long time. They've been drifting and drifting and drifting. And frankly, I think the Republican National Committee is out to sea. And I've seen this on the local level. I've seen it at many other junctures of American politics. The people who run that are the old establishment. I mean, it's almost like Great Britain. These are the people who go to the hunting lodges on the weekends and who sip cocktails together in the high clubs in Washington. And I've seen those people. I know many of them. They're the people who are very uncomfortable if you begin talking about abortion, if you begin talking about gun rights, if you begin talking about those issues that don't comport with, for example, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. So, yeah, the Republican National Committee has drifted to the point that it's out of touch with Republicans.
Interesting. All right, back to the White House. I only got about a minute. How important is it? Well, let me just ask you from your experience. Did President Nixon pay any attention to his advisors, or was he his own man?
Nixon was his own man. He took some advice, some counsel, but he pretty much went his own way, and that's what did him in the Watergate cover-up. There were a number of us who wrote the president memoranda saying, "Mr. President, this was right after the Watergate happened. We had no idea, those of us on my level, had no idea the extent to which those tentacles reached into the White House." And I, among others, wrote the president memoranda saying, "Mr. President, please go on television, go to the American people. Tell the American people that you personally are taking charge of cleaning out the committee to reelect the president and to deal with this issue, and that you will not tolerate this kind of politics." Those memoranda never got to the president, and to the extent, because Bob Haldeman controlled what went to the president's desk, and to the extent that people like my boss Harry Dent were able to talk to the president about this, the president would not take that counsel. Instead, he himself became engaged in the cover-up.
Gotta go. Sorry, Wallace, I got to go. Look forward to having you back, friend. Take care of yourself. And if you get any more calls from Bernie, let me know, will you?
I'll do it. I'll tell him to follow you.
All right, buddy. See you next time.